tonight?
Yes, tonight's topic is engaging youth in service projects.
Oh, that's cool. So, welcome everybody. The normal MC in the house, GMA. We call her Grandma or Gma or the doctor, or we give her all kinds of nicknames. We call Robert Robo Robert. We do nicknames around here. It's a term of endearment. Anyway, welcome to everybody, no matter where you're at, TikTok, YouTube, in my living room, anywhere else you are. Welcome. So, Robert, we'll get into it, and then hopefully Gma will come in because she's the brains of the operation.
All right. So today's the first question is, what are the benefits of involving youth in service projects?
Well, I think the first thing is, my famous line, especially regarding after school programming, but it could be with youth, period, is that this is the practicing ground for the real world, right? So anything that we can do to simulate as close to the real world as possible, then that's the best, right? And so ultimately, that's why I think service projects are critically important as far as the big picture goes. And then from little bite-sized chunks of that, I think that it builds character, skill development, civic engagement, right? Because in the end, these are the things that we should be thinking about, regardless. And I know with the AmeriCorps program in particular, we used to do a lot of service projects. Like I think almost one time a month that we were doing that, and I'm sure questions will come up about that, and we can dive deeper into the what I call the W's, the who, what, when, where, how. The how spelled backwards. That's why I say the W's. And how did all those things come about? So it looks like Gma may have joined us, at least in her
I
voice,
did.
maybe not her face. Can't see your face, but
Oh, so I can see my face, but that doesn't mean you can.
we can hear you. So
So
that's
I
good
will.
enough. They can look at my ugly
Okay,
face
so
and your
we'll
great
go
voice.
that way.
So the first
Absolutely.
question
Well,
was
I just
the first question
go
was
ahead.
what are the benefits of involving youth in service projects? So I answered first, but you're up.
Okay. So I was not able to hear what you said, but I think the biggest reason to include kids in service projects for me is that I think a lot of times young people are seen as resource users, right? They use up resources. But when they participate in a service project, they are a resource provider. They are a contributor. And I think that it's really, really important for people to understand early on in life that you can contribute. The world can be better because of you, and that you have value add. And so for me, that's why I would want to have youth in a service project. And a lot of times, service projects are already planned by the community. So you're not having to do all the planning, all the legwork, you're just participating. So maybe there's a walk run for homeless people, and you want your kids to be engaged in that, and so they can do that and they can provide service by doing that because they are contributing to the overall dollars that are going to that. But I do think that a lot of times service projects can be planned by somebody else, but that's what I would say. So Robert, is there another question?
Hi, Cindy. Our next question is, how can I identify service projects that resonate with youth?
So I'll start with that answer, but one of the ways that I would do it is by asking them what they'd like to be, what they're interested in doing, right? Because if you aren't asking them and you're trying to decide what you think they're going to be interested in, I don't know how successful you can be with that, right? So ask them, what are you interested in? What would you like to do? How would you like to participate? So that's what I would do. I would talk to them, and we had a group of first graders who came up with a service project, and they came up with it because what they wanted was the box, that this big wooden box that was on rollers, and they wanted that, and it contained all the lost and found stuff. And so what they did is they came up with a service project to get the lost and found articles back to the right kids, and if they couldn't get them to the kids, they would donate them. And their whole motivation was to get this rolling box. But they provided a great service because all of these items of clothing and baseball mitts and all that, and hats, that kind of stuff, got back to the rightful owners. They learned how to go to the laundromat to wash them all so that they could give them to somebody as a donation. So they had lots of learning in that. So they learned a lot, and they provided a great service for the school, and they got the box with a roller because that's what they wanted. So I just think you have to ask young people. So Brett, how about you?
I was cracking up laughing because now my first thing, I'm like, ask them what they're thinking, right? And then obviously, just like with Chat GBT or whatever, you may have to prompt them if they're not used to thinking about that kind of stuff, but ask them, right? Brainstorm that out, real life situations. I'll give you an example of something that we did. So I don't remember the whole backstory, but somehow there was a lady kind of across the street from one of our schools that was a middle school slash elementary. They had two different campuses that were like separated by a parking lot. And so when we were doing AmeriCorps, I found out that this lady's garden was getting trampled on, I think, by the instructional day kids. And so we, as after school kids, said that we're going to go and talk to her and see what we can do. And so, sure enough, they were beating up her plants and pulling them out and trashing them and whatever. So we developed a service project around that to where we went out and we created a garden. Well, in this particular place, she had about, I don't know, maybe a half acre to an acre. And so the front part of her garden stretched all the way to the back part. Well, in the end, she was so excited and so happy that we went over there, I believe it was a Saturday, and handled business, that she said, "Will you keep coming out?" So the bottom line was we built this huge garden, and there would be field trips where we would go over there for generations to come, and she would talk to them about plants and horticulture, and we would have, we would take lunches over there. So instead of having a field trip that was, 10 miles away or something, it was right around the corner from the school. And so we developed such a great relationship, uh, with her and the kids with her. And then obviously nothing ever bad happened to her garden because they were the ones out there working on it. And so they would protect it, and they would go out and on the side and say, "Hey, can we do this?" And she would tell me on the weekends they would come and, can we put weeds or do different things of that nature? And again, going back to my first response, right, that is the practicing ground for the real world. That's what we should be doing as youth, is helping the community. What we should be doing, she wasn't, overly elderly, say that three times fast, but she was older, right? And so we should be helping the elderly. We should be helping the people that are getting trounced on or different things of that nature. So I just think that ultimately that's a big deal. And the last thing about the asking, so my mom, who was whatever her official title was at the time, but when she first started, I think it was the program director of out of where we were at. She asked the whole community, put out surveys, and they had identified like 10 or 11 areas. And one of them was after school programming that they needed. And so that's why we did after school programming. And I think over the years we were there, we hit like 9 or 10 of their needs because we asked. So maybe we should ask.
Hallelujah, right? Instead of going, what do you think? So yeah, I agree 100%. And I do remember the garden for sure. So Robert, is there another question?
Our next question is, what strategies encourage youth to take initiative in service?
I could go back and say, asking them what they want to do, right? If they will take initiative, if they have bought into it. Initiative starts with there's a graphic. It looks like stair steps, and the first level of initiative is to wait to be told. And if we have enabled young people enough, they will just stand and wait to be told because we've convinced them that that's what they need to do. The second layer, if that's the lowest level, the next level of initiative is ask permission to do what's the routine. So, for instance, in expanded learning program, we have snack every day at 3:30. So, if you were asking permission, if you were at level 2, you'd say, "Well, should we go to snack today at 2:30?" Well, yes, we should because we should do that every day, right? The third level of initiative is to offer a suggestion, but to re, to recant it immediately, to pull it back because you're afraid somebody won't like it. And then the fourth level is to say, I intend to do this. And then you're asking for feedback and input so that you can do the right thing. And I think that where we want our young people to be is to say, hey, this is what I think. This is how I'd organize it. This is what I would do. And then you can talk and tweak and adjust if you need to, but then they already own it and will be taking the lead on it. And so in the perfect world, young people would lead the program, right? And the adults would be there for supervision, but they wouldn't really have to do too much. But I think that the way you get them to buy in is to ask them and then let them lead the project. So Brett, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I'll start with what you were talking about. We used to bring investors in. So GMAW had created, once we got going, got our own house in order in the after school program, we did a board and brought in investors, bankers, different things of that nature. And they would make the comment to us regularly, where are the adults? Because we had the kids do everything. There was a kid that was the secretary. There was a kid that was a clerk. There was a kid that was the site director. The kids were leading the classes. The kids were, getting the balls out and the supplies and setting up the field and you name it, right? We even had kids that did our interviews. And I've mentioned before in the past that we actually had one gal, because we had everything planned for them and everything. And so we gave her the questions and she gave us the stop sign and said no. And she came in, little fifth grader dressed to the nines, nice little dress, her power suit. She had her own questions. Well, she wound up leading the Fortune 500 company with HR. Well, that's the end game, right? And so again, begin with the end in mind. Reverse engineer it from there. This is the practicing ground for the real world. All those things that I had mentioned earlier. So when you were talking about that, I was laughing because, right, we have this whole ownership model. They should be doing input, and when you may have to ask them, and you may have to prompt them a little bit at first. You may want to play a little king and queen of the world, but in the end, you want to do as little as possible and let them, do their thing. And so when they get that input, then they're going to get involved. And when they get involved, now they're going to buy in. Now you ultimately get a commitment of that buy-in, and they're going to not only be taking initiative, they're going to run everything about it. They're going to do it from A to Z once you practice this a few times because they love it, so to speak. Another systems thing that I do is I call it it's hard to say, captain caption. I always want to say captain council, but it's captain. See, I still get it messed up. And I'm the one that created it, for goodness sake. But let's look at the caption on other people, right? And so if we're doing that, we're taking the initiative right from the jump. We're taking a look and we're saying, okay, what's going on in their brain? What are they wanting? What are they desiring? What are they needing? So on and so forth. And then it's easy. The next step to take the initiative is how can we help them or support them, not enable them, but to help and support them to get the ... done. Another way that I want to say that is, so they used to say, get in a straight line and walk. And it's about looking the part. And it's like, no, we're not here to look the part. We're here to be the part. And part of being the part is taking initiative. So my kids would walk as a clump, but because we were looking at everybody else's caption, if we saw somebody, like say a teacher, that was carrying a heavy box or had their hands full, they got their coffee mug, they got this and that, we would stop everything and we would go grab stuff and walk it to, their classroom or whatever. But boy, when you're looking the part, I've seen these lines of kids who just are running over these other adults because they're thinking about the line. They're not thinking about their caption and how to take initiative to be able to be helpful, to be supportive, to be that servant leader, and so on and so forth. So I think there's another thing to be said about initiative. It's not just about looking the part, it's about being the part.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's a great reminder. So, Robert, is there another question?
Yes, our next question is, how can I teach youth the importance of giving back to the community?
You know, uh, giving a gift and receiving a gift are really reciprocal actions. So, most people have received a gift before. They've received something. Maybe it was $1 for the tooth fairy, right? Maybe it was the bicycle for their birthday. And I think if we talk to kids about how did that feel when someone gave you something? How did that make you feel? Did you feel appreciated? Did you feel excited? Did you feel like they'd heard you? Right? That they gave you this thing. And then ask them, well, how do you think people feel when you give them something? Right? Would they have the same feelings? I think a lot of times we don't realize that how we feel when something happens to us is probably the exact same way somebody else feels when it happens to them. And so if you start to be able to get out of just how it appears or seems to you and start to realize that you have the same sort of feelings that other people do, well then how can we make other people feel supported? How can we help other people feel like we've heard them, that we're looking at their needs? And then I think it makes that easier to start to come up with ways to be of service because you realize what would be helpful to you. This evening, with the group I was in, we talked about would you rather? Would you rather do this or that? And sometimes just that simple question, would you rather give a person this or would you rather help them in this way? So maybe there's a gift you could give them, but maybe there's also a way that you could help and support, like the kids did building the garden, right? Well, which is the most long lasting? Maybe building the garden rather than just giving her a carrot or a radish. So I think that that's part of it. I think that to help kids understand their own feelings when they receive something and then how that would translate if you give to other people. So I'll pitch that to you, Brett.
Yeah, we used to start with a homework assignment when we would do stuff like that. It's very similar to what Gma was saying. So I would have them. I'd say, hey, go home and talk to your parents, your aunties, your grandmother, your cousins, your brother. Talk to people, maybe your neighbors, whatever the case may be, and see if they'll come in and give a story where they were down in the dumps or when somebody gave back to them as being part of the community. Because we've all been there, right? We've all been in need, right? If you're a college student, about the 50th time that you're eating top ramen, you don't even get the sauce with it. You just get the noodles, right? We're all in need from time to time or at different times in our lives or whatever. So we found that the most powerful way to kick something off was to have them come in. And so we would get, sometimes 2, 3, 5 people. Sometimes it would take 2 or 3 days because a lot of people would come in and we would say, can you get your mom, your dad, your auntie, your grandmother, your sister, your cousin, your neighbor to come in? And they would give the most powerful stories. And I like to relate a lot of stuff. As you guys know, I know sports and I know the Bible pretty well, right? It's the testimony of what Jesus did for you that gets people like, oh my goodness, because there's a heart piece to it. It's not just a logic mind piece, there's a heart piece to it. Well, when you have somebody who comes in from the community and said, hey, I was in this situation, and because they gave back to me, this is where I'm at now, and now I'm able to, be able to give back to others, pay it forward or pass it forward, which was a big thing that happened back in the day. I still do it. Like I'll go through the drive-through and I'm like, hey, I want to pay for the person behind me meal, right? And then you just drive off, and you can see sometimes out of the corner of the rear view mirror or something. They'll be like, thank you, or whatever. But to me, it's all about that. It's all about giving back, and and it starts with one person and one idea, and then they can do amazing things. Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It was just one person that decided to give back, and that has saved countless lives. And there's countless things like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Giving back so matters. Okay, Robert, let's move forward.
All right. Our next question is, what role does collaboration play in successful service projects?
Well, other than it's absolutely essential, uh, it's very difficult in a service project to have a person be able to do it. Now, I'm not saying that you can't ever do that and give back as an individual, because you certainly can. But a lot of times, the projects that kids want to do are pretty involved, right? So I just to refer to the first graders who wanted this ball box for themselves, right? Well, somebody had to figure out how to lay out the clothes on the asphalt so that kids could see it. Then somebody else had to build a schedule so that the classrooms knew what time to go out. Somebody else needed to figure out how to clean that up at the end because not everything went home. And then some other group worked on the notice, the making the flyer that would tell people what was going on. So all of these groups of kids each had a specific task to do to make the gathering, the getting of the box theirs. And so when you collaborate like that, you realize that everything's important. So a lot of times, I don't know about you, but I don't think about my back, for example, unless it hurts me. And yet if I didn't have a back, that would be problematic for me, right? I don't think about my feet until my feet hurt, but I rely on my feet all the time. So if you can help kids to understand that whether your task is writing the newsletter home about the to come down to the school and check out for lost and found, or your job is to lay the objects that have been found out, or your job is whatever that is, it's important, because without all of us working together, we can't achieve the result we want. I think that you can help with collaboration. And I think that we talk with kids a lot about becoming independent. And I think independence is important. You start your life very dependent. You wouldn't survive if somebody didn't care for you. And then you become independent, and little kids will say, I'll do it myself, right? I'll do it myself. But the next step is this understanding, this deep understanding of interdependence, that we are all in this together. And by working together, we can do far more than we would do by ourselves. And so I think that's why collaboration is important. And I think that, you give kids choices as to which one of the committees they want to be on, so that they're doing the thing that most suits them. But you make sure that everybody has a vital role, and that the roles don't have to be all identical. Everybody doesn't have to do the same thing. So that's what I would say. So, Brett, how about you?
Well, it's funny, once again, with PE, with sports teams, with all of that. I mean, there are obvious sports that where you're doing it as an individual, like wrestling or track and field. But a lot of the sports, it's just built in, and it's something that I don't have to think about, because that just was my favorite subject was recess and PE, right? Going through. And and I've talked about this before, that as a PE teacher, you had to teach the 211s, and the 211s would be every sport imaginable. So it was little 2 uniters in college to become, a PE teacher. And whether it was archery or swimming or football or basketball or whatever, you had to go and teach at the end of the year. And so when we got to the teacher credential program, we just dominated everybody else, all the elementary teachers and everything else. And we had asked them, like, well, why aren't you guys, no offense, but why do you suck at this? Like, why are you no good at this? Well, we've never done it before. You've never taught since you've been going, in college for the last 4 years. You want to be teaching? No, we've never taught one time. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But anyway, getting back to the team part of it, it's just such second nature for me. And so the importance of it in collaboration or teamwork, I would say they're one and the same, to make sure that you're successful, whether it's a sport or a service project. I'll give you an idea. So we have this really talented seventh grade basketball boy. And I mean, he's one of the best I've ever seen. I've coached some heck of athletes, professional athletes, you name it, I've coached him. He was right up there. But he didn't understand team ball, right? And so I said, I'm trying to doing everything with him. And he still didn't get it. I said, you know what? You're all that in a bag of rocks, as my mom says, or a bag of chips, I think is what it is. And I said, he's like, yeah, I'm the best, whatever. I said, great. Pick the five, what you would consider to be the weakest athletes on this team. So he picked these, five little guys. And I go, good, go play him one against five. Well, these five beat the dog out of him. And I said, do you get it now? Without team, right, we're in trouble. And just like Gma was saying, and the Bible says it in one of the passages, right? Not everybody can be the hand. Not everybody can be the eye. Not everybody can be the ears. Not everybody can ... And I think that's a major big deal when you're talking about collaboration or playing as a team in anything in life, and for sure in service projects, if you expect for that to go well for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Robert, tell us who's on this call with us tonight.
Right now we have 6 followers on YouTube, and then we have 8 on TikTok.
So, hello to all of you out there in TikTok. I'm echoing out there in TikTok and YouTube land. We really appreciate that you're here. And I'd love to have you put in the chat, if you would, how you knew to come to this tonight. Was there something that we sent out that particularly caught your eye? Because what we'd love to do is have more of you come, but we don't know what's working unless you tell us. So if you could tell us by just putting it in the chat so Robert could read that, that'd be awesome. What is it that caught your attention about coming to learn and hear what we have to say about service learning? The other thing is, if you have any question that you would like to ask, please don't hesitate to do that. We're going with frequent questions that we're frequently asked, but we would love to answer your specific questions, or at least maybe not answer it, but give you our thoughts about it so that you can consider what an answer might be. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate that for sure. And so, Robert, we're ready for another question.
All right. Our next question is, how can I connect service projects to real world issues?
I think that a lot of times service projects connect to things that people see as a challenge. So a service project for kids might be to do the walk run for cancer, or to do something else for Alzheimer's, or to do something else for people that have macular degeneration, or to do something which our kids wanted to do, was to make blankets and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to take to the kids who in Kern County are at Jameson Center. And Jameson Center is a place where kids go when they're not in foster care yet. They could end up there, but they're not there yet. But they really don't have a place to stay. Their home is somehow disrupted, and they may not have relatives, but they're kind of in no man's land. So they go to Jameson Center. Well, we had a number of kids who'd been to Jameson Center before. And when they were talking to their friends, their peers, they said, the thing you miss the most at Jameson Center is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because they're all busy giving you very, appropriate food like you get in the cafeteria, school cafeteria, and you miss the peanut butter and jelly. And the second thing is that you would like something that's yours, right? That you can hang on to. And so what they came up with is that they would make a batch of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We called the Jameson Center and asked if we could bring them up. We did not have the kids go with us. The adults took them. But the kids also then decided to make these fleece blankets. And what they did is they got 2 yards of fleece for each blanket, and they were the exact same size. And then they cut like in about 3 or 4 inches all the way around, and then they tied the two pieces together. So we were doing a service. It was a project that everybody could contribute with, and then we delivered them. And we actually got a couple notes back saying thank you. But what they did is they picked the project because they understood that. So sometimes we join a community service project that's a loftier goal, like doing a run walk for cancer or something like that. But there are also projects that kids can do based on their own lived experience that will be really helpful. And so you might have to jumpstart them sometime, but you will discover that they've had some lived experiences and they can tell you what would be of service to people in that same situation. So if that's the case, that's I would definitely go with that. To have it be real world, authentically real world to them, not to you, not higher level, but to them. So Brett, I'll push that to you.
Well, I was cracking up at the wrong time, but when you were talking about PBJs, so
Oh,
we have several businesses, and we've had several businesses, and one of them was downtown in the general area of what she's talking about with the Jameson Center, and we had a thrift store and an antique store, and my youngest would go and would work it, and so what would happen is that I would drop him off in the front, and then you would unlock. So it had a gate and all this stuff, and then I'd drive around to the back alley, and then he'd let me in the back. So he wasn't letting me in one day, and it was pretty early in the morning. So I walked back around like what are you doing, dude? Well, he's out there talking in the middle of the street to a guy who had a car. Well, this guy went out and gave PBJs to the homeless. Well, my son didn't know this, so he took the PBJ and was like, "Thank you very much." I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, this guy offered a PBJ. I love PBJs," because he was a big Crustables guy too. And I said, "You knucklehead!" I said, "That's for the homeless." That guy thought you were homeless out in front of the thrift store there. But anyway, and then they did. There was a lot of homeless in that area. Anyway, so I was cracking up at the wrong time because you were talking about serious stuff with kids in the Jameson Center. But anyway, yeah, I think we just figure out what's trending, and I think Gma hit the nail on the head. What's trending for them? What's important topics for them, so that we can connect that to real world issues. Because what could be more important than something that's happening right there in the moment? And then if we can do something about it in real time, and then ultimately, what do we want? Like that movie with the mini me's, right? I think it was the little guy that did that. I forget the name of the movie. But what you want is for them to go out and create their own service projects, or just do it by themselves, or whatever. Just think about it. I mean, if you look at the pebble in the water, which Gma loves this touch point, the pebble in the water, you don't know where the ripples are going to go. And so I'm sure even to this day, some of the service learning projects that we did in the past, that people are coordinating those, like the kids are now adults and coordinating them, or they remember that and they're just going to go do their own thing to be able to help, and different things of that nature. And we find that anything that's current, that's in their face, something that's important is usually going to get the biggest bang for the buck. Because remember, we buy on emotion, we justify with logic. So if it's in your face, that's emotional, and you're going to be more apt to do that. That's why we tell people, when you're emotional, take some time back, because you don't want to react. You want to respond to that. But it also goes the other direction. And in this case, if you can connect to the real world issues that are out there, again, personal, something for them. If it can't be personal and they can't think of stuff, have them ask teachers, or you can partner with other experts. You could partner with the Jameson director or the homeless director or different people of that nature, and get involved in that way. So if they can't come up with their own, trendy or what's in their face right now, that's personal, and they can go out and ask others, and that'll be personal for them. And then we can, go and help and work that through.
I just want to add to that. One year we had kids who wanted to go to the SPCA, right? And that was where their heart was. They wanted to be able to help out. And one of the things they discovered is that they use a lot of shredded paper as the fillers on the bottom of cages so that it cleans up easier. And they brought bags and bags and bags of shredded paper, right? Because it made sense to do that. And it was something they cared about. And so it doesn't have to always be with people. It can be with animals. It could be with SPCA. It could be in any number of things. And I think that that it's interesting what they'll come up with that they are interested in and that matters to them. Whereas I would have personally, I would have never thought of the SPCA, but that was very clear for them. They'd gotten rescue animals, or they'd lost an animal or whatever, and it really mattered to them. So just be open to what they have to say, because they will come up with some great things that they can do. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
I like
Robert.
your
Oh,
famous line on that: "Be open, not attached to outcome." And I think you've
right.
said that a lot. And I think that's, we need to be open to everything. We wouldn't maybe think of, well, I would SPCA, but maybe you wouldn't. And what they come up with is amazing. And remember, that ties back to ownership too, because it was their thought to begin with. And then if you just clamp that down by getting the commitment of that ownership, they're already halfway or more there to begin with.
Absolutely. For sure.
That's
Okay, Robert, you're up.
yes. Your next question is, how do I foster a sense of ownership in youth for their projects?
I think Brett just answered that, right? I know, in a brilliant way, right? That if they get to suggest it, if they get to plan it, if they get to be a part of that, from the input piece, right? From the beginning, from the input to the end, giving them the feedback about what went well and what didn't, right? Then you will get ownership. And if you can get ownership one time, you'll be able to get it much easier the next time, because they know now how that feels to own it, to be able to go, yep, we did that. This was on us. And so, Brett, you might want to add to that, but I think that your example before was truly a great answer.
Yeah, I mean, it starts, I'm a systems guy, right? That's what I do, or process, procedures, schematics, whatever you want to call those. But, start with choice. So they're getting the choice. So that starts leaning them towards ownership. And then you give them that choice. And then they're going to have that input. It's going to get them involved, which is going to get them to buy in. And then you ultimately slam dunk that buy in by getting the commitment with that. Then they go out and do it. Then you're going to collect the data on it, and then you're going to have them share out on that. So what happens is that it's able to run, full circle, so to speak, for them. And so when you talk about ownership, we start every day with the formula on the board that we call the accountability formula, which is ownership, right? That's what that is. And so we say it goes CE. It's like a foot or like a baseball diamond, right? And so CE would be like third base, and then over at first base would be ER, and then second base would be M, and at home plate would be A, and that would be underlined, highlighted, asterisk, quotations, whatever, because that's the big thing. And then they knew that stood for third base, clear expectation. Second base, monitor. You monitor, not me. I'm going to be monitoring it too as the overseer, but you need to monitor it. And what are you going to monitor? You're going to monitor the end result, right? And then you're going to hold yourself accountable if you were unable to achieve the end result that you came up with to begin with. The expectation came from you, not from me, right? And so we have the 90-10 rule that we put upon that. Now, 10% of the time, it'll be what I say as the boss or the leader or the teacher or whatever. But 90% of the time, we're going to listen. We're going to, get the input from you, the choice from you, the buy-in from you, and all of those things. So I think if you look at it as a process and then look at it as like a baseball diamond, the infield, so to speak, that could be extremely helpful in fostering that ownership. And then once they get it, like GMA said, then it's easy to plug right back into it for the next service project or the next whatever activity or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And so, Brett, I know that you just said what the bases were. Will you say that one more time? Because I think that's such an important thing. And so describe that to them one more time so that they can be sure that they plugged into that.
Yeah, so it's kind of bass backwards. It's reverse, right? Typically, you run the first, second, third, and then home. But what we're saying is we started at third base, which was clear expectations. And if you put this on a whiteboard or a chart paper with them to give them the visual, and then I always ask them, hey, what does CE stand for? And you get all kinds of, crazy thoughts and whatever. And the first time, right? Once they get it, then you just put it up and you just plug them back into it. So they say whatever they say. And then, but really what it stands for is clear expectations. When we first did this model, so GMA and I, over the last 30 plus years, have come up with a lot of models, cycles, formulas, you name it, we've created it. And if we can't create it, then we borrow it, just like you would if you don't have enough money for a car, you go borrow money from the bank, so to speak, right? So it used to be just E, expectations. And we said, no, they need to be very clear expectations. So that's going to be third base. Then you go up to second base, running this, diamond in reverse, and that's going to be the M word, and that's for monitoring. And they come up with all kinds of M words when you ask them the first go around. But that's going to be monitor. So clear expectation, monitor, and then first base is going to be the end result. A lot of people, which is fine, they want to talk about collaboration and they want to talk about, the process, and all, which is great because you have to do all those things. But I like to talk about the end result. I like to start with the end result, and I like to work my way backwards from there. Reverse engineering, first principles thinking, backwards plan, so on and so forth. But first base is going to be that, and it's ER for end result. And you ask them, and they go, emergency room when you first ask it the first go. And then with the A, they're like looking around. They don't know what the A is. Remember, it's underlined and bolded, highlighted, asterisk. I mean, you name it, right? And then they get to accountability. And I look at them very serious. I tell people I'm going to tickle their ears when I'm real serious, right? And I lean forward and I say, you can understand this accountability formula. You now understand half of life. They're looking at you like you're crazy at first. But that baseball diamond or that accountability formula, I truly believe it's 50% of life, because you can probably higher than that, truth be known, because you can plug anything into that at any time.
Okay, thank you so much for repeating that, because I think that's such an important understanding. And sometimes, you're not listening until you're halfway through, and then you think, what was that? So thank you for repeating that. All right, Robert, you're up.
Yes, our next question is, what are effective ways to involve families in service projects?
I go through the kids, right? I mean, how I find it, I I think this, anytime you can get a kid to ask you for something, it is 1,000 times harder to say no than if you get an adult to ask you or you send an email. I can just ignore your email. I can ignore your text. If you say, can I do blah, 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 I can say no to you very easily. But I find it incredibly difficult to say no to my grandchildren, right? And they are 27, almost 24, 9, and 7. And it doesn't matter if it's the 7-year-old or the 27-year-old, right? I care about them, but somehow them asking and them identifying what it is makes it much more difficult to say no. And so, what I think is important is that you help kids become the sales pitch, right? And Brett has a comment that he makes, and he can elaborate on it. But either you're going to sell the person on doing A, or they're going to sell you on why they're not. So if you can help a child, a young person, be able to say, look, we really need your help in the service project. This is how you can be helpful. This is how you'll feel like, this is how I'll feel supported. You can help them do that, and they can sell their parent if it's at all possible for the parent to do that, because the parent realizes, and in most cases really cares about what that child thinks and feels. Now, they may not be able to do it because of work schedules or something of that nature, but they'll be able to, at least the child will know that the parent gave them a reason why they couldn't. So for me, if you want to engage a family, engage a child. And then children can engage the community as well. So Girl Scouts have been selling cookies for years. And they do that by engaging the community, by engaging their family, by asking for support and asking for help. And it's really, really hard to turn them down. That's why kids sell candy bars door to door. I mean, I could go on because they understand what they're asking for and why they're asking for it. So if it were me, that's how I would get families and community involved. So, Brett, I'll push that to you.
Well, I got a bunch to say. Part of what will answer the question, and part of you just let me know that you're a terrible poker player. You just showed me your hand. So from now on, I'll be asking you nothing, but I will get either my brother's kids or my own kids to ask you. So
Absolutely.
if you get an influx of text from them, I'll pay them $1 a text. You're going to be getting like 500 things done over the next month. But anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah, that was funny. Uh, so what I like to say is, you remember like back in the day, they'd say bring a friend day. You get to bring a friend for the day, or we used to do
Hmm.
it in the after school program. Well, we would say bring a family member for the day, right? They don't necessarily have to be part of all the planning and doing all of that kind of stuff. They can just show up on that day. So let's say that a typical, service project takes a month to plan and work through and all that, and then you have the actual day where they're going to do something. We would say bring a family member for that day, and then on the tail end of it, when we would do like a debrief or a culminating event, maybe the next week or whatever. So let's say we did the plants or the garden on a Saturday, then we would invite that person in, but also the family members that were there, and they would be able to give a testimony of what it meant to them to be able to participate and to help. And they'll share insights that are very touching. And again, people, they buy off emotion. So when you're hearing these touch points, or you're hearing somebody's story or what they learned from it, by being the giver, let alone the person that's receiving and what they're getting from it, and they're teary eyed and all that stuff. I know Susan and I, my wife, we watch American Idol, and that's going on right now. And when you hear the story of these people, you're tied in emotionally to them.
Hmm.
So not only can they sing like angels, you're tied into who they are, the stories. So we find that if you can do that and trying to bring them in on the front end during the process, on the back end, and then the culminating activity, that can be extremely, 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 powerful. And then just the last thing was she mentioned on sales. So before I was a salesperson, I was a teacher and a coach, and I thought that was a nasty word. Like, because why? Because salespeople are pushy and they're not very nice and they're jerks and they don't know how to take no, right? Well, I led a large sales force and I said, we're not doing that. I said, when somebody tells you no, you thank them and you ask them one question. Is that no, not right now, or no, never? And if it's no, never, leave them alone. If it's no, not right now, let them know that you'll come back and talk with them in 5 months from now and see if things have changed, because stuff changes in their life. But what happened was that my mentor in the financial and insurances business, he said, "Man, you're one of the best salespeople I know." And I put up my dukes. I said, what'd you say? Because I was still thinking of it very negative. That sales, right? It's negative. Because salespeople, most of them are negative. And he goes, whoa, 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 whoa. What do you hear when you hear salesperson? I go, what's negative is that? He goes, no, no, no. He said, that's not true. He goes, are you pushy? No. Are you this? No, no, no. He goes, you're one of the greatest influencers that I've ever seen. And I went, oh, wow. So remember when she was saying that, you're either going to sell your 5-year-old or 7-year-old or 9-year-old that they're going to bed at 9, or they're going to sell you on why they're not. And that's all of life. There's sales going on all the time. Transactional sales are going on all the time. So that's a sidebar, but I wanted to at least address that, being you brought it up.
Absolutely. And I think that for some people, changing the word sales to influence makes it easier, right? I'm not selling you, I'm influencing you, but it's the same thing for sure. So thank you for adding to that. So Robert, I think we have time for one more question.
Yes, we do. Our last question will be, how can I ensure service projects are inclusive and accessible?
So inclusive, I think I just think that's an important word to understand. So accessible means that everybody has the opportunity. They can make the choice to be engaged in that or not. But inclusive is when I think sometimes you have to go an extra step to be sure that a person feels like they belong there. So I might invite you to my birthday party, but if I don't make you feel like I really want you to be there, that I'd like to include you in this, that I think that your coming would be a value add, then you may not feel inclusive. It won't feel inclusive to you. It feels different. So I think that the first part of inclusion is providing access so that everybody has the same opportunity. So I'm going to listen to every kid's uh, suggestion about what that service project could be, or every kid's suggestion about how we can carry it out. We might not use every suggestion, but we're going to listen to it. We're going to give it credibility and make decisions around that based on what we all think, which may be that that's too complicated, that's not complicated enough, whatever that is. But I think that it begins by providing you access, by asking your questions and giving you that opportunity. But inclusion is about a sense of belonging. So when Clayton said to me when I was walking campus with him, and I asked him, why do you come to this program? And he paused and he said, because I belong here. He feels included. And that doesn't mean he participates equally in every activity. But what it means is that he knows that that's where he belongs. And I think that with service projects, that's what we want from kids. That I have something I can contribute. I can be a resource provider. I have something to offer. I belong here. And so if we can do that, then I think that they will feel included and they feel valued. You have a contribution to make. Without you, this project would be less. So that's what I would say. So Brett, I'll kick that to you as the coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it extremely well, and even more so, I think I don't remember if it was last week or a couple weeks ago. You were talking about that, right? I mean, You're not going to go shoot the basket, but you could keep score. Somebody else may not be able to keep score because you're watching. I mean, it's a lot going on at the time, but you could bring the supplies or the basketballs, or you can get the athlete's water or whatever. And it goes back to that Bible passage: the ear, the eye, the whatever. Same thing with anything that's a team sport, and life is a team sport, right? Whether it's a family, they say it takes a village. Everybody has a part, and I think that when the youth are younger, they know. I I had all my kids do music, and I had all my kids do physical activity, sports. I had all my kids, right, the different things. I knew right away I had an athlete and I had a musician. They knew it. They knew it by the time they were 4, 3, 4, 5 years old. So a lot of times we think like they don't know. No, they know exactly what it is that they do. So I think that, and if they don't, then let them experience a little bit of everything. So then they can go, okay, I definitely know that, in my case, I'm not screwing screws because I, almost cut off my thumb and have done all kinds of dumb stuff trying to do stuff around the house, being Bob the Builder. But again, I don't know anymore, but back in the day, you wanted me to throw a football 70 yards. I could probably do that, right? So just understanding that major in your majors, minor in your minors. I say that all the time with my own kids. They bring home A's and B's and C's. I talk about their A's. Sometimes other people want to talk about their C's. Now, if they're getting F's, that's another problem. But if they're getting C's, that's okay. Not everybody can be all things to all people all the time in every activity. That's just not the reality that we live in. So, accentuate their great things and minimize or mitigate the stuff that they don't do so well. Not that they shouldn't do it, but they don't need to be doing it 24/7, just maybe a little bit, right? It's okay for them to do it a little bit of the time.
Absolutely. So, Robert, we've got 2 minutes. If you've got a short question, we'll try and answer it.
Next question could be: what are some creative ideas for youth-led service projects? Or
I think that it depends on the community you're living in. Go for a walk. Just go for a walk around the neighborhood and ask the kids, do you see anything here where we could be helpful, that we could be a value add? And maybe they'll discover that it's painting numbers for the house numbers, right? Because sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. Maybe they'll decide that they would, you know, trim a tree or something of that nature. And I don't mean like a professional tree trimmer, but maybe just pulling off the little branches that are growing out. But go on a walk around the school. What could you do here? What is it that we could do? How could we add value to this situation? And I think that that's one of the best ways to come up with service projects. And read the newspaper, watch the news, because they'll tell you things that are community wide. But the kids live in a neighborhood, they live in a house or an apartment, they go to a school. So what could they do? How could they be of service in that very small locale? And so, Coach, it's up to you.
Well, I'm going to go fast, and I'll give you something that we used to do. We would go speed round, and what we would do is we would incentivize it. We would say, what do you guys want to do? You have 30 seconds. What do you guys want to do as a group more than anything else next Friday on Fun Friday? And then they would, and I say, you only have 30 seconds. And they go, kind of like me, I only have 30 seconds to get this out. They'd say whatever it is. And then what we would do is we would go back and we would say, okay, what's a service project? You have the same 30 seconds to be able to achieve this incentive. And so they would go blah, blah, and they'd come up with stuff, and then they would pick one, and then they'd get it done within that 30-second period, and then I would reward them at the end. So I was able to demonstrate and to do that all in the same breath.
Yay, you. All right. So just thank you to everybody who's here. We appreciate it. And if you'd like to communicate with us, don't hesitate to put your email address in the chat box that you can do, or online, make a comment and we can comment on that, or we'll respond. Thank you so much. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Coach.